It's time to confess. I'm extremely handsome and good looking. Take me away, officers. I'm your host Yusuf, and these are 10 chilling things convicts confess during interrogation. Make sure you subscribe and ring that bell to get notified whenever we upload a new video. Anyways, got a confession you want to make? Leave it in the comments below. No judgment, guys. Number 10, Ryan Waller. This one is absolutely nuts, so I'm starting the list off with a bang. Ryan Waller lived with his girlfriend Heather Kwan in small-town America. One day, Ryan's father gets nervous because his son hasn't texted or called in a few days, so he calls the police to check up on him. Police pull up to Ryan's house and knock on the door, and after some shuffling, Ryan actually opens the door. When asked about what happened, all he can do is respond with, "I don't know." Police notice a woman on the couch just behind him, and Ryan says she's sleeping. Police enter to investigate and find the woman is his girlfriend Heather, who was shot in the head and passed away. They put Ryan in the back of the squad car for around 6 hours and then transfer him to the station to interrogate him. The interrogation is completely insane. Ryan responds, "I don't know," to almost every question. When asked about his girlfriend, he responds with, "Richie and his dad came over with a bow and arrow and shot at us." Then mid-story, he treads back and says it was a revolver, just a little revolver. The detective takes a good look at his face and notices something crucial before leaving the room in a hurry. What did he notice? Well, Ryan actually had 4 bullet holes in his head and face. Ryan had been shot 4 times while Heather had been shot once. The two had just evicted their roommate Richie a few days before this, and Richie came back with his dad and capped them both. Ryan survived miraculously with extreme brain damage. He just walked around his house for 2 days thinking his girlfriend was asleep. Ryan was transferred to a hospital and was given an extreme brain surgery. Both of his eyes were removed and he survived, but was permanently disabled with extreme brain damage. He passed away 10 years later from a seizure. The worst part about this is if the police didn't keep him in the car for 6 hours and the station for 2 hours, he could have still been alive to this day. Number 9, Jerrod Murray. On December 5th, 2012, Murray convinced Sanchez to give him a ride to Walmart in exchange for $20. Once they arrived in the Walmart parking lot, Murray pulled out a handgun stolen from Asher resident Daniel Davis. He ordered Sanchez to drive north of Asher. Sanchez panicked, and to ease his mind, Murray unloaded the weapon and placed the magazine in Sanchez's lap. However, unbeknownst to Sanchez, Murray had another magazine in his pocket, which he pulled out and placed on his own lap. They arrived on Substation Road, where Murray quickly loaded the weapon and fired 2 rounds at Sanchez. The first missed, but the second struck him in the head. The vehicle drifted off the road and struck a tree in a ditch. Murray exited the vehicle and dragged Sanchez out of the driver's seat to the ground, where he was still breathing. Murray fired another round into his head, ending him. He proceeded to cover the corpse with dirt, leaves, and a single stick. Police eventually found the body, as it was very easy to spot next to the wrecked car. Murray flagged down what he thought was a normal car, but what turned out to be a sheriff's car. He was returning to the crime scene, but noticed that there were cops and decided to hitchhike to Canada. He immediately confessed to the crime. When he was later interrogated, he explained every detail in his crime, and when asked what he thinks his punishment should be, he responded with the execution penalty. In his words, the punishment should be eye for an eye. Instead, he was found not guilty by reason of insanity and sent to a mental facility. Number 8, Ernesto Arturo Miranda. On March 13th, 1963, Miranda's truck was spotted and license plate recognized by the brother of an 18-year-old kidnapping and abuse victim, Lois Ann Jamison. With his description of the car and a partial license plate number, Phoenix police officers Carol Cooley and Wilfred Young confronted Miranda, who voluntarily accompanied them to the police station and participated in a lineup. At the time, Miranda was a person of interest and not formally in custody. After the lineup, when Miranda asked how he did, the police implied that he was positively identified, at which point he was placed under arrest and brought to an interrogation room. After 2 hours of interrogation, some of which regarded another offense for which Miranda was separately tried and convicted, Miranda handwrote a confession to the kidnapping and abuse of Jamison. At the top of each sheet was the printed certification that this statement has been made voluntarily and of my free will, with no threats, coercion, or promises of immunity, with full knowledge of my legal rights, understanding any statement I make can and will be used against me. After confessing to the officers, Miranda was brought to meet the victim for positive voice identification. Asked by officers in her presence whether this was the victim, he said, "That's the girl." The victim stated that the sound of Miranda's voice matched that of the culprit. Despite the printed statement on top of the sheets that Miranda used to write his confession on, with full knowledge of my legal rights, he was not informed of his right to have an attorney present or of his right to remain silent when he was arrested or before his interrogation. 73-year-old Alvin Moore was assigned to represent him at his trial. The trial was conducted in mid-June 1963 before Maricopa County Superior Court Judge Yale McFate. He was eventually let go and his charges dropped after he spent some time in prison, and the case was the origin of the Miranda rights policy the police now have. Number 7. Ryan Ferguson. In the early morning hours of November 1st, 2001, 48-year-old Kent Haytholt was ended in the parking lot of the Columbia Daily Tribune, where he worked as a sports editor. He was last seen alive by his co-worker Michael Boyd, who told the police that he had a work-related conversation with Haytholt in the parking lot between 2:12 and 2:20 in the morning. Minutes later, janitor Shauna Arndt stepped outside for a cigarette break and saw two shadowy figures near Haytholt's car. She ran back inside to get her supervisor, Jerry Trump. Both janitors witnessed two college-age men near Haytholt's car. The janitors reported that one of the men yelled, "Someone's hurt out here, man," before both men walked away through a nearby alley. The janitors notified other employees and called 911 at 2:26 in the morning. Haytholt was found severely beaten with a blunt object and strangled. On the same evening, 17-year-old high school junior Ryan Ferguson and classmate Charles Erickson were attending Halloween parties in the area. Ferguson and Erickson later proceeded to meet Ferguson's sister at a bar called By George, where a bouncer who worked there would admit them despite their age. After the two men had spent all of their money at the bar, Ferguson's sister bought them a few additional drinks before they departed. Erickson was under the influence of substances and drinks that night, and the following day he had no memory of what had happened. At a later hearing, attorneys asked Erickson whether he had noticed anything unusual on the morning of November 1st, such as injuries or blood on his clothing, but he stated that he had not noticed anything out of the ordinary. In the recorded interrogation, Erickson seems to have little knowledge of the crime. He told police, "It's just so foggy. I could be sitting here fabricating all of it." At one point, he was asked questions about the weapon used to strangle Haytholt. Erickson replied that he thought it was a shirt. When the police officer told him that it was not, he replied, "Maybe a bungee cord?" Eventually, the officer told Erickson that the weapon was Haytholt's own belt. Erickson replied, "I don't remember that at all." After much prodding by investigators, Erickson eventually told them that he and Ferguson robbed Haytholt for drinking money. In March 2004, Erickson and Ferguson were arrested and charged with the execution. Number 6. Matthew Muller. On March 23, 2015, Aaron Quinn called the Vallejo Police Department to report that his girlfriend had been kidnapped. According to court documents, he said the group of assailants then kidnapped her using his vehicle. When police arrived, Quinn showed them an area delineated with red duct tape. He said the assailants had ordered him not to leave the tape boundaries and said they would watch him through a monitor sensor camera they installed. According to court documents, Quinn described an intricate attack. He said that an unknown number of people burst in at about 3 in the morning while he and Huskins were sleeping. An assailant blindfolded him and made him listen to pre-recorded instructions on what to do next. Quinn was informed by the message that he would be sedated. An assailant took his vitals, possibly including blood pressure. Quinn was told that they knew where he banked and where he grew up. He was told this was a professional group there to collect financial debts that intended to kidnap his female companion. He was advised he would have to pay $15,000 for her return, and if he did not comply, she would be hurt, first by electric shock, then by cutting her face. Quinn fell asleep, according to court documents, and when he woke up, his car and his girlfriend were gone. He had a new email asking for 2 payments of $8,500. If asked about the withdrawals, he was to explain that the money was to purchase a ski boat, the complaint read. Shortly after, Quinn got in touch with the police. Then, in a further twist, the apparent group of assailants sent an email to Henry Lee, a San Francisco Chronicle reporter, intended to clarify that Huskins was indeed kidnapped. The email found in the court filing describes the group as a band of professional thieves, relatively new to crime. It explains that they had recently been involved in a number of car thefts in the area, but they wanted to try something with a higher payout. The email says that they wanted to try kidnapping in an operation that was meant to be a test of methods that would be used later on a higher net worth target, but the operation went terribly wrong. After making the jump from property crime to this, we felt deep remorse and horribly regret our slide into criminality, the email read. They were mortified about their crime's impact on Huskins and were very impressed with the strength she showed and who she was as we passed the time talking to her. It was the police department's disbelief that prompted this email. They said Huskins was absolutely kidnapped. We did it. We would rather take the chance of revealing the truth than live in a world where someone like Huskins is victimized again. Muller was eventually taken into custody in June 2015, having been traced through a cell phone left at a separate crime scene. According to a court filing, he later admitted that he acted alone and that there was no gang. Number 5. Dennis Rader. The man who goes by BTK was a horrible dude. We've covered him in videos before, but we never showed his court confession. Here's a transcript of what exactly was said with some changes so YouTube doesn't slap us in the face. The court. Alright. Mr. Rader, I need to find out more information. On that particular day, the 15th of January, 1974, can you tell me where you went to end Mr. Joseph Otero? I think it's 1834 Edgemoor. Alright. Can you tell me approximately what time of day you went there? Somewhere between 7 and 7:30. This particular location, did you know these people? No. That was part of my, I guess my what you call fantasy. These people were selected. Alright, so you were engaged in some kind of fantasy during this period of time? Yes, sir. Alright, now where you use the term fantasy, is this something you were doing for your personal pleasure? Intimate fantasy, sir. I see. So you went to this residence and what occurred then? Well, I did some thinking on what I was going to do to either Miss Otero or Josephine and basically broke into the house. Or didn't break into the house, but when they came out of the house, I came in and confronted the family, and then we went from there. Alright, had you planned this beforehand? To some degree, yes. After I got in the house, it lost control of it, but it was, in the back of my mind, I had some ideas what I was gonna do. Well, they started complaining about being tied up, and I re-loosened the bonds a couple of times. From there, I realized that I didn't have a mask on or anything. They already could ID me. Made a decision to go ahead and put them down, I guess, or strangle them. The conversation goes on, but I thought I'd end it there. It's pretty brutal. Number 4, Israel Keys. Keys targeted random people all across the United States to avoid detection with months of planning before he committed a particular crime. He specifically went for campgrounds and isolated locations. He claimed to only use guns when he had to and preferred strangulation. This was due to the pleasure he derived from witnessing victims lose consciousness in the struggle. He claimed to not harm children or parents of children, primarily because of his daughter, whom he feared finding out about him and his crimes. However, police and FBI investigators were skeptical of this claim and suspected Keys of harming several teens. Keys was arrested by Texas Highway Patrol Corporal Brian Henry and Texas Ranger Stephen Rayburn in the parking lot of the Cotton Patch Cafe in Lufkin, Texas, on the morning of March 13, 2012. Investigators had circulated a lookout bulletin for the suspect's car, which had been used at ATMs to withdraw money from Koenig's account. Keys' car matched this description. Keys was stopped after he drove slightly over the speed limit. His vehicle was searched after officers spotted cash stained with bright ink, indicating a die pack from a bank robbery. Koenig's ATM card and cell phone were also discovered in Keys' car. Keys was subsequently extradited to Alaska, where he confessed to the Koenig execution. He was represented by Alaska federal defender Rich Kurtner. Keys was indicated in the case and his trial was scheduled to begin in March 2013. While incarcerated, Keys spoke to investigators several times over a period of months. He cooperated to an extent, confessing to some of his crimes, and stated a wish to be executed within a year. Keys said he wanted to avoid publicity due to the negative attention his young daughter might face, but largely stopped cooperating after his identity was discussed in the media. Number 3, Edward Edwards. The first executions for which Edwards was convicted took place in Ohio in 1977. William Billy Lavico, 21, of Doylestown, Ohio, and his girlfriend Judith Straub, 18, of Sterling, Ohio, had been dating 8 months when Straub's car was found in the parking lot of Silver Creek Metro Park on August 7, 1977, her purse and shoes inside. Family members gathered in the lot the next day as Norton police, aided by a National Guard helicopter, searched the high weeds. There, they found Lavico and Straub lying on the ground, shot at point-blank range with a 20-gauge shotgun. He received life sentences for these crimes in 2010. The second pair of executions, another double execution, occurred in Concord, Wisconsin in 1980 when Tim Hack and Kelly Drew were stabbed and strangled. These were referred to as the Sweetheart executions. Edwards had been questioned at the time, but there was no bias to hold him. Almost 29 years later, his connection to the crime was established by means of DNA testing. Edwards' own child, April Blasio, tipped off the police about his possible involvement. Edwards confessed to the 1996 execution of his foster son, 25-year-old Danny Boy Edwards, in Burton, Ohio. The victim had lived with Edwards and his family for several years. Number 2. Jeffrey Dahmer. Jeffrey Dahmer completely admitted to ending his victims in a confession. To this day, I don't know what started it. The person to blame is sitting right across from you. It's the only person. Not parents, not society, not adult content. I mean, those are just excuses. This quote was especially freaky when he said it because he just outright admits that he was the only reason he did the things he did. Dahmer was an extremely ill man, and his childhood consisted of his mother almost taking her own life and his father being neglectful. Unfortunately for Dahmer, this quote is most likely untrue. It is a well-known and studied theory that early childhood development plays a large role, especially when exposed to a dysfunctional family. Number 1. Ted Bundy. I don't feel guilty for anything. I feel sorry for people who feel guilt. This proved that Ted Bundy was remorseless. A person who is remorseless doesn't feel any guilt. If you're remorseless, you don't feel bad at all, even if you've done something terrible. When someone is remorseless, that person has no feeling of pity for people who have been hurt. The night before his execution, Bundy confessed to 30 executions, but the true total remains unknown. Published estimates have run as high as 100 or more, and Bundy occasionally made cryptic comments to encourage that speculation. He told Ainsworth in 1980 that for every execution publicized, there could be one that was not. When FBI agents proposed a total tally of 36, Bundy responded, "Add one digit to that and you'll have it." It seemed like Bundy had no care for anything, turning the entire tragedy into a game for the FBI and the public. Both have called him evil before, and he didn't believe he was. Thanks for watching. Leave a like and comment if you enjoyed this one, and we'll see you next time on Crime Time.